Shut up and sit down.
Welcome to the Bricks King podcast, where I'm going to bend your ear about Lego, review those amazing bricks of plastic, and discuss what is new and up and coming around the Lego world. I'm your minifig host, Matt. Let's build on it. Welcome in, everybody. How are we doing today? Hope everybody is doing well, healthy, happy, and moving on with wherever you are in your week, whether you're on your weekend or a vacation, or you're heading off to work, or just got back from work, or are at work in some cases. I hope everybody's doing well. Today we have the recap follow-up interview show with Dave and Richard. Obviously, they got kicked off. If you heard the last episode, the most recent episode, you guys knew that they were booted off. So we're going to jump into that with the interview questions. Actually, some really cool stuff. And again, really cool people to talk to and just really pick their brain about different things. Now, I will tell you, I am really sad that they had to go home. So far at this point in time, they are probably the pairing that I was like really, really bummed about, especially hearing them talk, because they were not somebody that had been together for like long. Like they're fairly new friends, and they're not somebody that, you know, grew up together. They live in different parts of the country and stuff like that. So it's a unique situation. So enough of my babbling. Let's get into the interview. Here we go.
Hi, guys.
Hey, Flynn, what's up?
I can't say I'm terribly happy to see you here right now, but I'm happy to see you here right now.
Yeah, for sure. Always good to see you.
So my question, one of my questions is, what are your art influences? We're so all so influenced by things around us and media that we take in and all sorts of things. I'm just curious what your influence in your pieces is.
Do you want to kick that one off, Dave?
Sure. For me, the influence is really life experiences. I like to look at what's happening around me first on, there's spheres of influence around all of us. So you have your people who you live with in your home. There's people in your neighborhood. There's people in your city. There's people in your state. And it just goes out from there, radiating out. And the things that happen to me in my life is where I draw my art influence from. But I also look to the Lego community and I want to see what's being done there, because you can't just build in a vacuum. And I think one of the most important things about working with Richard is that we never built in a vacuum. We always collaborated together, and our builds were better because of that.
I totally agree with Dave. I think for me, art influences, I think I find art in everything. Coming from New York, I'm constantly surrounded by art. My son wants to be an animator when he gets older, so I'm constantly like looking at things that he's inspired by, cartoons, different drawing styles. But again, like I said, art is in everything, and from composition to color to details. Coming from New York, I've always been surrounded by street art and graffiti. As I've grown older, I've always appreciated fine art. I think in terms of like composition and texture, I think I gravitate to like I'm a huge fan of Pied Mondrian. So like the colors are really, really a derivative of what Lego does in a lot of their primary colors. So there and Dave and I talked so much about composition and art styles in our builds, and that was a focal point for a lot of what we did. So you can really draw inspiration from so many different corners of life and be able to make those art connections in our builds.
Awesome. So if you of all of the models that you built on the show, which one would you say is the most personal to you? Like when you were making it, you're like, this is the one that feels most personal.
They're all really personal. I think we went into every build with that intention. We wanted to make them a reflection of us and a reflection of something that was personal or sentimental to us. Even down to like the puppet shoes, like things like that. Like, yes, we were the things that even people weren't able to see. Like in that case, people weren't able to see the shoes, but like I love the Clark style of desert boot or the Wallabies, like things like that. Like there's always like a little taste of reality in the things that we do, and we want our builds to live in the real world because they come from the real world.
I mean, I'm sure, Flynn, you're looking for like an answer of a specific model, but like Richard said, you can't take this work of 9 builds and pull it apart, because it tells a story of who we are as people and what we believe in, both on a personal level and on a social level. So none of these builds I don't think either of us could say is the most personal to us, because each one is a different part of us. We're complex people. We're all complex people, and you can't just say one build was a personal build. They were all personal builds for us, and that, I think, is one of the things that set our team apart.
We also couldn't do one build without doing another one. There's so many things that we learned from one build going into the next build, and things that we didn't want to do from the previous one and the next one. There was so many learning experiences in each episode. And so we're grateful to have grown. I think this entire body of work shows growth.
And if I could just add one more thing, because I think this is an interesting thought about Lego building, is that when you're building something, I learned this from one of my favorite podcasts. It talks about film directors and how each film that a director makes, their subsequent film is a reaction to what they had done before. So each one of our builds is a reaction to what we had done in the previous build. And that's why you really have to look at it as an entire body of work.
That was a perfect
I love that
answer.
podcast.
Thank you, guys. That was great.
Great, thank you. So I guess my first question for you is, prior going into Lego Masters, how would you have classified your own building style, and how well did that translate to being on a reality show like this?
For me, I think my building style was just more about efficiency and not so much specific things, because I'm a collector of sets and someone who is still learning how to build original creations. I was learning as I was learning through this entire process. So for the most part, I would say like my storytelling and my efficiency in building was really the crux of what I brought to the show.
When I think about building Lego, I never think about competitive speed building, which is what Lego Masters is. What I think about is taking time to think about what I want to build. And I'm very much a person who like processes things in my mind. I don't build digitally. I don't draw things out, but I'll go to bed and I'll wake up the next morning, because I've been thinking about it all the time. I'm always thinking about whatever I'm building, and I kind of build in my head in advance. But on Lego Masters, you can't do that, because you just have to start building. The clock is running and you just have to build. And it was a totally different way of building, but I think we were really successful at it. I think time really wasn't much of an issue for our team. It was more sometimes we didn't have enough time to think in advance and have enough time to adjust, but I'm still proud of every single build we did, and I think they're all great.
100%.
Great. And then my second question for you is, if you could go back to your pre-Lego Masters self and give yourselves advice on what to do before going into the show, what would you say?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I might need a second for this one. Dave, do you know, or are you still thinking?
I would just say my advice to my pre-Lego Master self would be really consider how much Lego weighs and how much it weighs if you put it on your body.
Yeah, I think that's just a life lesson right there. Just knowing how much you can handle, just being realistic with what you can put on your plate. And I think, we were a little overly ambitious sometimes, but To answer your question, I think if I could tell myself something different, I'd probably pay more attention to the math that's involved in Lego. I would be more conscious of, how many rows of studs I would have to go over, and then how that applies even to sculpting. That's something that I think I overlooked on some occasions, and I think it's really important to pay attention to where you are in your process. Because when you're building, you have your head down, you're just like in a tunnel, and you're just always just trying to get this thing done. But then sometimes you're forgetting that you have to pace yourself, and you have to be aware of where you are and with each brick that you put down.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, JC. Hi, Richard. Hi, Dave. I am happy to see you, but so sorry to see you under these circumstances. I absolutely loved your builds. As an engineer speaking, anybody who includes the Fibonacci sequence into a build that shows up on Lego Masters is like a major favorite in my book. So I'm really sad to see you go. First question I had for you, especially near the beginning of the season when there's 12 teams and everybody has a lot of builds and they're all fantastic and every build gets about 30 seconds of screen time. We don't get to see the details. What are some of the details from your builds that we didn't get to see on the show that we should know about?
That's a great point. Wow. We can just, do they have to be in any order, or can we just like cherry pick?
Yeah, cherry pick ones that are memorable to you that you said, oh, well, we put a lot of effort in this and it didn't show up on the show.
Honestly, I may have missed something in the most recent episode in Land and Sea. I don't think there was enough screen time on the environment of Poco. Maybe there was a flash of, a section, but I don't think we really got to see the 360-degree view of everything. There are a lot of elements in there, down to the fish bones in a bucket that we made for Poco. There was an amp with chords going into the guitar. I think the scale of the guitar was just as impressive as the wingspan of Poco. I think when you really look closely at that build, there was a lot to notice. There was a really great brick wall around him to kind of like show that it almost gave that vignette type of feel, but on a really big scale.
And I think, Richard,
yeah.
I think that also not just the environment, but I think a lot that was cut out of that build was how the coral texture had spread onto the feet, how it spread onto the chest, how there was even some on the beak, but that just wasn't part of the cut.
Yeah.
Any of the other builds that didn't get the attention on camera?
I think the first build, I think we can both agree that the parade float had so much going on that wasn't shown, from the way that the letters spun and that the design of the letters was based on the flags of New York and Chicago. The chefs had movement, although it ultimately did fail just as it was coming around the corner. They were waving. The toppings on both the pizza and the hot dog, we made sure that hot dog had every single Chicago style topping on it. I think the skylines in the back, there was so much detail in that build, and we really put everything we had into it, because you're on Lego Masters. When are you going to get a chance to do that again? So you might as well throw everything literally on the table.
Another thing that I think was really important in the Hero Shot episode was the amphitheater that was built behind the urban blight. Dave was the goal was to, once the building exploded and fell apart, you would see a little amphitheater with minifigures in the back, now enjoying the music being played by our hero. And there was a lot more focus on the explosion and not the aftermath of the explosion, which was just as important, because every story has a beginning, middle, and end, and the end was this happy, joyous, melodic, harmonious balance between men and nature. So I just want to make sure I have our wording right, because that was essential to our story because we had such a difficult minifigure.
Okay, for my second question, you've gone through 9 epic builds in a really short period of time. How, and I mentioned this because I saw Mark posted on Facebook when he posted Bernie the Burnt Out Dragon, that they took some inspiration, that they were getting a little burnt out from doing all this builds in such a short period of time. How did you handle that? Having to come up with novel creative ideas right after the other in such a short period of time?
I think one of the keys is just the way that we communicate with each other and that we trust each other. We really spent, even though we had never built together before Lego Masters, we had spent a lot of time talking on the phone leading up to it, a lot of time just learning about each other and learning about how the other person thinks. On our days when we could, we would go for walks together and just talk about things, whether they're about the show or whether about our personal lives, or maybe watching the NBA All-Star game together, but just making connections. And because we could make those connections with each other, it meant that you could throw out any idea and find a way to make it work. For example, when we got the violin guy, Richard started talking about environmentalism. And that was one of the touch points that we came into the show with, that he wanted to do an environmental build. And I was thinking, what does the violin guy have to do with environmentalism? But he explained it and I trusted him and we made it work. And it was a really successful build. But that trust and that communication is what made our creativity flow.
Well, as not only an engineer, but an environmental engineer, I'm especially sorry to see you go. So thank you for your time. I'll hand it off to the next person.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you for your questions.
Guys, man, you were probably one of my favorite groups of individuals to watch on the show. I learned so much about the way you guys build and stuff like that. And for complete strangers, it just blew my mind as how well you built. So Megan, kind of, you guys kind of talked about your relationship a little bit and how you guys connected as best as you could. So moving forward, do you guys think maybe in the future you're going to start attending shows and maybe collaborating on builds together? Or is this going to still be, hey, you know what, we're in different states, we're still good buddies, but we can get together once in a while? Or are you going to make more of an effort to really get together and experience building together?
I first of all, I've never been to any of the Lego conventions. I know of them. I've just never been to any, and I have so much more that I want to learn as a builder, and other people I'd like to meet. But I want to meet those people through Dave, because when we were going into the show, there were so many people that he was familiar with, and I was like, man, oh, and he was telling me about some of their really great work. And I was just really fascinated by this whole world that I was just getting accustomed to just through writing about Lego. So I want to really continue on forward and just keep talking to Dave. We talk every other day, or if not every day, and it's not just about Lego. So I'm happy that I have a new friend, and we have new experiences and new adventures to have together.
I mean, how often do adults make new friends, lifelong friends? It doesn't happen, especially once you have kids. You don't make friends like this very often. And to have gone through this experience together, to be in a creative situation. I mean, anybody who's been in a creative situation knows how stressful it is, but also how much you can get out of it. And we not only got great builds out of it, but we got a great partnership out of it. And there's no reason this partnership should end, because over the last 9 weeks, we've been doing mini builds. And I might be doing the build, but I'm running things by Richard as I'm doing it. And he's doing the writing to go with it. And it's that combined effort. It's not just what you build. Anybody who does Lego knows you're presenting not just your build, but you're thinking about how to present it, what the words are. It's all important. All of that goes together to make it part of a story that you're telling through your builds. So this is definitely a collaboration that's going to keep happening.
Oh yeah, I can't wait.
Awesome. That's great to hear. So I wanted to talk about the highs and lows. It seems more recent that the people that have exited the show were at a high point, and then a few weeks later, bang, then they're out. And I want to go back to the build that you guys built with the fan, the testing machine that was going on there. And your build was just amazing with everything that was blowing on the ground. And the movement was so realistic. I could not get over that. So going from the highs of winning that challenge to, this week of ultimately going home, where frankly, I don't really see how that should have happened. But with that in mind, how did you guys manage to deal with that, going from way up here to, man, we got to pack our stuff and go home?
That's a very layered question, and my first answer to that is, first of all, like, the show doesn't allow you. There's no resting on your laurels. I think our production schedule didn't allow us to be able to just like relax and just have a break and revel in a victory or revel in being safe. I think a lot of times we had to just, whether we won or we were safe, we just had to just think about the next day and the next build. And for us, that's not the easiest thing because our builds are so different. We can't say that we want to do something similar to what we did in the previous build in the next one. So we had to just completely wipe the slate clean and just start fresh. So it was really difficult to do that. Also, it's like playing sports. When you have a game, you have a moment to just like enjoy that victory and just like, be proud of yourself. For us, like, we're just constantly trying to push ourselves to be better and to do bigger or do something stronger and also anticipate the unknown. I mean, there are so many curveballs. Like, there are things that we couldn't expect. So honestly, we just had to have a positive state of mind.
I think also when we talked about, like, we put ourselves into every build, it's hard to be disappointed when you do that. Because if you really put what you believe down in brick, then you're not going to be disappointed that you didn't do a good job, because you know that you've represented yourself and you're true to yourself. And I think that was one of the things that made it easy to say, the Brickmasters might not have liked this as much as they liked something else, but we love it just as much as everything that we've done. And no matter what, at the end of the day, we're so proud of every single build we did. No matter if it fell forward or didn't have enough coral on it, we love it. It's fine. We think it's great. And hopefully other people see that too.
And I gotta say, just real quick, that like, I was so happy once I was able to work with Dave again in that challenge. It was just like, I think like it was like there was something missing. There was so much that we were able to like pick back up on. It was almost like we started over, like we started the season over for some reason. It was so weird. It's like our conversation just like picked back up, like it hit the ground running, and we just had so much to talk about. And I'm really happy that things went the way that they went.
Well, I've had a great joy watching you guys participate in all the challenges, and hopefully we get to see you maybe back in an all-star series in the future or at conventions. So best of luck to you guys moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Well, before we get any further into this, with all of this information these guys are spitting out on these questions, let's take a quick break and we'll be back in a moment.
Loved your puppet. Can you walk me through that challenge and like what the design process was and the sculpt and movement?
Go ahead, Dave.
So again, we need to consider how much Lego weighs, right? We learned our lesson on that one. So I think there were two strategies. People had rods or people had bust puppets. And we went with the rod, but instead of putting it in the head or holding it way down low, we put it right in the torso, because anything you try to hold up that long above your head, you're going to get tired doing it. It's heavy, and holding it up for a long time, it gets really heavy. So I think there were so many parts of that build, Ben. I mean, it's hard to talk about everything, but one choice was making the skin smooth versus making the body textured. were both huge Muppet fans. We had talked so much about the Muppets before this episode, before we even knew about this challenge. We were talking about our favorite Muppets. I actually talked to Anthony Dominici because I knew that he had worked with the Muppets before. And I was like, tell me about your time working with the Muppets and why you think Ralph is the best Muppet, because I think Ralph is the best Muppet. And I just wanted him to confirm that. And then all of a sudden we had this puppet challenge and it was unbelievable. But, you know, I love that puppet. It was so fun. It was so fun to make a full body puppet. I think it would have been great if we could have kept the legs at the full length that we originally had them at, but we really had to shed weight because it was getting so heavy.
Yeah. And I did not want to put all that pressure on Dave to hold it up while I was trying to read the script. And at one point it was going to be both of us working the puppet, but I think we would have lost something in the process with us trying to spend too much time on the performance. So we did the best that we could.
Cool, thank you. Now, half of these challenges had you destroying something or something broke. Even last night, you had to take apart 2 different builds and combine them. So how'd you handle those kind of builds?
Well, I think it was pretty seamless for us to be able to incorporate the coral into the penguin because we knew instantly where it could go and how much we can use without it being so that it could have a fair balance between both creatures and making this hybrid. So once we got the coral on, we felt like, all right, let's just make this environment and make this crazy, cool story that was going to really wow people, because the goal was to bring everyone into the creature's world, but also that world should be so robust. And I just felt like it was pretty seamless in the beginning. And the scale of mine it paled in comparison to Dave's, but I mean, with 5 hours and having never done making coral before, I was just like, all right, I'm just going to do what I can. And I want to hit all my touch points. I want it to be colorful. I want it to be movable. That was something that was not really highlighted at all. I mean, it's an afterthought, but there was some movement in the coral. It was colorful. You know, it had its own stud texture to it, and it was unique.
So the question is about breaking and how we felt about breaking all these different builds. And I think...
Sorry, I thought we were just focusing on last night. Sorry.
I think the answer is that you watch Lego Master Season 1 and it's all about the twist. And you watch Lego Master Season 2 and it's all about what limits can you push Lego to. And they're not, neither one's right, neither one's wrong. They're just so different. And pushing the limits is something that our team was constantly about. We tried to think outside of the box on so many challenges. So pushing the limits of Lego was like pushing the limits of creativity. So I appreciated it. I mean, maybe they didn't all have to be all in a row. Maybe we could have mixed it up a little bit, but it was fun. It was super fun. When else are you going to get a chance to do some of these things? I don't have a pyrotechnic guy at my house wiring up my Lego for me. I don't have a giant fan. This is the only time this is ever going to happen. We should be so excited about these opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent.
Thank you.
Hey, Dave and Richard. Listen, you guys know what fans of yours I am, and I'm absolutely gutted to be talking to you both today. But this is what we're tasked to do, so we're going to do it. The one thing I feel like a lot of people are probably wondering is just your perspective on the challenge last night that we saw in terms of how to interpret what the judges were looking for. Obviously, you being unique and trying different things, you interpreted it one way and were ultimately sent home for that sort of interpretation. Just walk me through your thoughts about how the challenge was set up and kind of the way you guys approached it, especially knowing how it all turned out.
I was nervous. I was nervous about having to do this challenge by myself. I want to make sure that I'm not going off on a tangent before I even start. Can you just what's the main part of your question?
Yeah. So the main part is I think that the judges essentially, I think, sent you home because of an interpretation of the challenge.
It's how we interpreted it, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's weird. It's like, you have, I think the issue for me was how my build could be interpreted. The challenge that I had was, okay, I'm going to create coral, as wacky and crazy as that is. Is it a creature or is it an environment? And that was something that I was grappling with a lot. So what came later on in terms of the twist in the challenge, I was able to put some of that stuff behind me, but then ultimately with the way the result of our creature was interpreted threw me for a loop, because I was like, it was very noticeable. The coral was very present, and I think it was misinterpreted as a penguin. I think they saw a penguin, but that's not what we were calling it. We called it Poco the entire time, and even a lot of the recaps tend to say penguin in it, and it's like, it's not a penguin. It's Poco. It's a new creature. It's a Poco. It's not like it's a penguin in coral, and that's why you have Poco. I think that was a misinterpretation to an extent.
It's a very layered question, Michael. I know exactly what Richard's talking about. One time we said to the Brickmasters, we're going to make a punk rock penguin, and then that was it. That's how the edit was made. And it's a punk rock penguin the whole time. And then every other time we were like, we have to refer to it as Poco. Penguin, coral, put together, portmanteau. But we're known as a team for thinking differently from other teams. We build the exoskeleton tower totally different than what everybody does. We leave the wheels completely uncovered on the car and nothing gets stuck. We think about sound as well as motion. And those are just the ones we won. You can talk about so many other builds about us thinking differently. So again, what we always wanted to do was think differently, to think outside the box. So I will admit, I'm somebody who keys in on certain things when the Brickmasters talk. And, they may have said mashup a lot of times, but what I keyed in on was, we want a creature we've never seen before and bring us into their world. Right. So when we're putting the coral on top of the penguin, and we are putting coral on top of penguin, and then it's infusing down his body into different parts of his body, he has become something new. He's not a penguin. If you look at that penguin, it's nothing like what it ended up being. It was two totally different things. And, just like Richard said, building in a vacuum was not good for me. I didn't enjoy building that penguin by myself. I was like, what am I thinking? I'm building black and white in front of Amy? This is not a good choice. There needs to be something else. But when we came together, you could see the two things becoming something new. And to us, it was a new character that you'd never seen before. This was not a penguin anymore. You don't see penguin. We made a character because we know from watching last season, the Brickmasters love characters. They love storytelling. Now, ultimately, finally, we didn't get rewarded for thinking differently. And I respect that opinion. I respect that this is the way that the rules are interpreted, but as a teacher, I'm always looking for kids who are trying to think creatively and look for different solutions. And I think that is something also important in life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's certainly the way that we saw it. But the one thing I wanted just to ask is for my second question is, when we talked to you preseason, you mentioned just, maybe it's to your point about thinking differently, but that you wanted to bring something different to this competition with all of the messages and things like that. And we certainly saw that along the way. But watching the show back now, how do you feel about, that mission that you set out from, at the start? Certainly you may have felt it on the day, but seeing how it actually manifests in the show, I'd love just to get your perspective about how you feel like it all turned out.
Can I go first?
Yeah, please.
Okay. The moment when they said that we were activist friends was probably the moment that I felt like we did it. Like, I know it was very early on, but for us to know that they accepted us for who we wanted to be on the show and didn't force us to be something. They didn't make us activist friends. We are activist friends. We care about things and we're friends through that activism. And the fact that we were allowed to do that through our builds, through our storytelling, through who we are as people really meant a lot. And we've gotten so many comments on social media, but also when we go to conventions or events, people say, I see what you're doing and I appreciate it. And thank you for doing that. And that almost means more than anything else.
Yeah, you said exactly what I was thinking, Dave. I wanted when people saw our builds that they saw a little bit of themselves in it. And coming into the show, for me, I'd never built with anyone before. So I didn't want to just hog this opportunity for myself and just go crazy and just make a bunch of space stuff and things that I grew up doing. I didn't want to do the same thing that I was used to seeing in Lego. I wanted to do something that had never been done before. And I think that's the stuff that really attracts me to Lego as an adult now, that I can see my world through Lego, and I can apply Lego to so many other things that I wasn't aware of and didn't have the capabilities to. So this was an opportunity to just go where we were never able to go with the resources that we had. And we're really, really proud of what we've done and the platform to be able to speak without a filter.
If I could just put a button on it. I talked to my son last night and we were talking about, well, you didn't win, Dad. And I said, you're right, I didn't win, but sometimes it's not about winning, it's about what you do on the show and what other people are learning from what you're doing. And I listed off the things that we talked about on the show. I said, well, we got Black Lives Matter on TV. We talked about redistribution of wealth. We talked about helping the earth. We talked about being a good parent. And we even talked about LGBTQ plus rights that didn't make the cut, but it was all in there. And sometimes that's more important. And he was like, yeah, but if you had the money, we could have also helped people too.
Well, that's great.
Thanks, Elliot.
Yeah, thanks, Elliot. But thank you both. This was really a great chance to talk to you guys, and hopefully it won't be my last.
Thank you, Michael. We love your questions.
Thank you, Michael.
Well, that'll do it for this episode, this interview with Dave and Richard. Some really good questions, really interesting stuff to hear from their perspective, their side of things. And one of the things I found really intriguing to me is they were just really kind of focused on their building. They really didn't, saying they didn't care is the wrong phraseology here, but it seemed like they were just more focused on what they were doing and learning and building and having fun. And it's almost like the competition came second, which I think is really bizarre considering, what you're playing for, what you are there for. And obviously they're not going to say, oh, the competition meant nothing to us. No, but it's kind of almost like a fresh breath of air. It's not like we're out to win this. No, they were actually out to have fun. Not saying that the others weren't, but out to have fun, out to learn something new, make some relationships, have a good time while you're there. I mean, just take advantage of that opportunity. And they really did. And that was really cool. So until next time, I'm your minifig host, Matt. Let's build on it.